to teleportation research. Our boy has a lot of ideas to share with Rachel and Arson. They start working right away. While our boy learns to hide his mana, the spell itself isn't the hard part. The hard part is keeping it running. Siegfried is the only one there who can tell whether our boy's aura is leaking, so he can't leave the castle until the training is done. A lot of training sessions and work sessions happen until our boy finally gets what he wanted. Nobody would imagine he can use a sword like a master. It's time to travel again. Siegfried says goodbye, saying he won't go easy next time they train. Our boy says he doesn't plan on staying an easy opponent. Now they need to return to the capital. The mysterious man gets news too. Surrounded by women, he already knows exactly what needs to be done. It's time for him to go back to the capital. This is the queen's nephew. Ellen can't stop being surprised by our boy. He managed to gather a huge treasure, exploring land that wasn't even supposed to be fertile. Malir really was a good choice, and what used to go to her family now belongs to them. The protagonist is genuinely good at this. The maid asks if she can lock that door, and the mage allows it. Walking through the corridors, he runs into someone, the king's eldest son. An unexpected coincidence for the great mage. Even so, he stays polite in front of him, saying, "It's been a long time." Blanche is wondering if he's the one who changed our protagonist, or maybe because he changed so suddenly, he went looking for guidance from someone. But no matter what he does, Blanche can't get an answer out of anyone. Ellen says she has a lot of questions too, because the prince stopped drinking, and he must be taking things that make him think too much. Blanche realizes there are more people who miss the drunk version of him. Still, the mage agrees that people change, getting past fears and challenges, and stopping themselves from falling back on reckless impulses. The way it happens isn't always what matters. Blanche seems disappointed by that answer. As the mage walks away, Blanche knows that comment about being reckless was aimed at his past action. It's been 20 days since our boy left Siegfried's lands on his journey. They changed their route a bit, because Veronica's horse looked tired. Rachel's acceleration magic was way too intense for them. The noble in that land seems reasonable, and the butler believes it was good they stopped there. While our boy is getting a bit of rest, a loud noise catches his attention. That's exactly what he needs, so he asks his butler to deliver a message. The message gets delivered. Our boy wants to be introduced to the guests who just arrived. That makes the noble a little uneasy. He's receiving people from the queen's family, and even though he's level-headed, he knows they don't like the third prince. He considers sending his guests away, but the butler continues the message. If Gray is among them, Kion would like to invite him for tea. The noble feels relieved because what happens next isn't really on him anymore. Finally, it's time for the two of them to be introduced. Gray accepts the invitation for tea, and it's time for them to get to know each other better. As they exchange their first look, Gray says he's recovering from a shoulder injury, so he doesn't feel able to stand up and bow to our boy. Only a noble family can remain seated in the presence of royalty, and they belong to the royal lineage. Gray thinks he's being understood, saying he's in a lot of pain, but our protagonist tells him to lower his head since that's something he can do. Even the butler feels the air get heavy. He's afraid something might happen to our boy, believing he still has a weak body. Arson catches a butler's spine behind the door. Updating the others, he says they need to stay alert. An interesting visitor has arrived. Before he can say who it is, Hina approaches them with tears in her eyes. The butler tells her to calm down and explain what happened. It looks like something happened to Kiri and the knights outside. Arson decides to go out there to find out what's going on, but the butler advises him not to make the first move. The mage keeps going, aware of the responsibility he carries. Growing more anxious, the butler realizes it's only a matter of time before something bigger happens. Gray is not happy at all about being ordered to lower his head. Kylan says that behavior is extremely disrespectful. The prince won't say it twice. Completely furious, Gray stands up and again Kylan tells him to bow. But this time he says it with a bit of that sinister energy of it. According to the butler, the two of them have met before a long time ago. For Kion, that makes sense. It explains this man's arrogant, and he must be shocked by the change in behavior. Now, it's a question of whether he'll take the bait and try to attack someone he can't beat. Kion wants, with every molecule and atom in his body, for that noble to choose violent. Gray starts to realize the rumors about our boy might be true, but he's stubborn. Thank God the host of that meeting, scared out of his mind, tells Gray to be more respectful. After that scolding, things might have gotten worse, which makes our protagonist deeply regret it, because that man is close to his own death, even if he thinks that won't happen. Holding back his fury, Gray bows politely. Kylan says he's feeling tired now, and he'll continue the meeting another time. That only makes Gray even angrier.
But before leaving the room, Kion tells the host to take good care of the noble because he looks a bit unwell, comments that completely crush Gray's ego, but attention quickly shifts outside. A huge fire has just broken out. That's Arsen's magic. As an eye specialist, he would never use an explosion like that, unless, of course, it was to warn our boy. The mage blew up a carriage using a fireball. Arsen still doesn't know exactly what was going on, but he tells Kiri that our protagonist won't be happy about that. The other knights are furious. On one side, they say he destroyed the carriage of someone important. On the other, Arsen says they provoked someone who serves a person even more important. They're employees of the third print, and the noble's attendants should learn to respect them. The knights decide to take that argument head-on, but our protagonist arrives right then just to confirm they're nothing but Madam's dog. Inform the prince. They get nervous. Our boy asks the mage if he'll need to compensate for the damage. Arsen says it won't be necessary. He'll pay out of his own reserves, so that settles it. Kion believes nothing serious happened, but then he starts to notice Hine is missing. She always stays close to her brother. Arsen says those men tried to grab the girl to have some fun. Kylan starts smiling like a total degenerate. Now he's burning with rage, ready to finish those knights off. When Gray gets outside, it's already too late. His knights have had their tongues cut out. Arsen says they no longer belong to the Knight Order because they did something unforgivable to one of the prince's attendants. Gray feels even more humiliated after all of that. Several commoners witnessed everything. Kylan says his mage will reimburse the destruction of the carriage when they reach the capital, but that was the last straw for the stupid noble. Kylan asks if his squire has nothing to say about it. Kiri stays completely silent because he's already seen plenty of humiliation caused by his mute sister. Now the prince is worried about her well-being too, which is more than he ever could have dreamed of. Still full of anger, Kion orders his squire to keep his posture. That night, Kion manages to relax a bit more, drinking some tea. With him is the host of those lands, who judged all that behavior reckless because the noble is completely furious, and he might even try to attack the prince on the road. That would be extremely dangerous since he's a sore mouse, but what that noble doesn't know is that our protagonist managed to measure his aura, and at best, they're evenly matched. Our protagonist would fight him with nothing but a knife in his hand, and it still wouldn't be a problem, so he tells the host that a confrontation doesn't worry him. Words so honest that they surprise the host because our boy truly believes it. The prince's composure impresses. Even so, he still has something else to say. It's about Kiri. He's already done several laps around the training field. He asked if our boy was really going to let him do that all night. Kylan said yes because that guy needs to learn a lesson. They both have their own responsibilities, and our boy is trusting his safety to Kiri needs to be someone capable. The noble understood that it wasn't just punishment. That mage who got burned in the carriage wasn't punished. Kiri is being punished for a lack of trust, not for bad behavior. Kion expects complete trust from everyone who works for him. That made the noble feel a bit jealous because it's a privilege to serve a master like that. Kion found out that Gray asked to borrow the noble's carriage, but they were all broken, so it couldn't be done. Way too convenient. And yeah, it really was just an excuse from the noble. He said his lands are very modest. He can't afford to lose a carriage, so he didn't lend one out. Our boy took the chance to make an invitation, handing him a letter. He said that noble could request an audience whenever he wanted. Kylan also said he'd like company on the way to the capital. Accepting the letter, the noble promised he'd be ready to leave together with our boy. In the capital, Planche is talking with his mother for the first time in 5 months, and the first thing she brings up is our boy. Plant asked why she misses the protagonist, and Sis said Gray would be arriving soon. And it looks like Plant can't picture the path the queen has laid out for him, which made the prince ask what she meant. Sis said he's acting like a child. Being loud doesn't change the fact that he's wrong. When Gray arrives, Planche needs to do everything he can to keep quiet. Watching the queen closely, he said some people become unrecognizable while others are incapable of changing. Sis, in a sly way, told the boy not to try too hard. Planche said he could give her the same advice, but to avoid trouble, he'll do nothing, just like she wants. In contact with his master, Kion said they'd arrive soon. He was told the king wants to speed up the formation of the Mage's Corps. After the coming-of-age rite, Kion gained a lot of notoriety, and with Gray being humiliated, they need to be careful. The Queen's family's knights will be restrained. Ellen realized that's basically a declaration of war against that family, but the king is doing it to protect his son. The problem is that the king is now at risk. The Mage's Corps will be presented when the prince arrives, and a ceremony will happen a week later. Our boy is very worried. Even with his master's protection, the king will be in danger, especially with Gray in the capital. Our boy's butler said there's another route to reach their destination. Knowing that, Kion is willing to take new risks because he needs to get to the Empire's capital first. Meanwhile, Gray is traveling inside a carriage made for women, which only makes him even more furious. He was told their caravan is being followed. It's our protagonist closing in fast. Gray doesn't know how the prince got there so quickly. It must be some magic trick. Kylan said that idiot still doesn't know how to treat nobility, which pushed that man's rage to the edge. He's tired of being scolded by our protagonist. It's time to scrub that place's floor with our boy's blood. A huge explosion happened, and to Gray's surprise, he's being grabbed by the throat. Kion is slowly choking that bastard, summoning his energy sword. Kylan said, "There's only one person to blame for all of this, because honor demands he defend his own reputation. In front of everyone, he punished the noble for disobedience. For God's sake, they didn't even show what the guy's wound was, but he's on the ground begging for mercy." Kion asked if he still hadn't wondered why his brother had disappeared. A large amount of money was handed to his father, and after that, his problematic brother vanished. Maybe the same thing is about to happen now to the eldest son. Kion made it clear he doesn't have much patience, so he'll ask only once who attacked the boy that day. Completely obedient, Gray said it was his own father. That made our protagonist sad, seeing how cruel that father is to his children. Looking at that noble servant, Kion said they should back up that version of events too. Still terrified, they also said they aren't going to the capital. What happened there was just a small family disagreement. Our protagonist is being watched. Carrie is hidden in the forest. This was done for him too. As for the boy's past actions, it's all been forgotten. Kylan said his subordinate used to know him better. Finding that strange, Kiri asked when that happened. Our boy decided to tell the truth, but they've got plenty of time. When he arrived in the capital, the protagonist's presence was celebrated because the dragon had revealed itself to people are saying he'll inherit the throne. Finally, our boy managed to meet the rest of the family. He greeted his brothers very politely, and the two returned it with a certain indifference, especially Planche, who still seemed very intrigued as he returned the greeting. Kylan couldn't even believe it was happening. This was completely unexpected. It has to be some kind of sneaky plan. During the meal, the king started talking with his son. He heard Randall is still reading a lot. For our protagonist, that family gathering is the weirdest thing he've ever done in his life. The king, who used to be totally indifferent, now seems very friendly. One of the servants had to interrupt the meal, bringing urgent news to the king. He asked for that woman to come in. Watching Planche's reaction, our protagonist already knows who it is. The queen came to meet with him, too. After being greeted by our boy, the queen walked past him, indifferent. She asked if the trip was smooth, and Kion said it was even safer than expected. Sis said she was worried. She was afraid he'd come back sick. Kion replied that the last time he got sick, he ended up even stronger. There are hardly any problems beyond the castle wall. Knowing what happened during his coming-of-age rite, Sis got a little uneasy. His reputation reached even the empire's capital, so she went straight to the point. She asked if the king intends to make our protagonist the heir to the throne, a question that caught everyone there off guard. Kylan realized this was a desperate move from the queen. The king said he had a conversation in the presence of the great mage, and the suggestion was to name his least favorite son as heir. That would solve the problem of the most troublesome. But there isn't a single child of the king's that he doesn't care about, and because of everything the queen has done, the king is thinking about making his decision. The queen slammed her hands on the table in fury, saying the king would regret it because he's ruining everything she built. She stormed out, and the king apologized to Planche for what he had to hear, because those words weren't meant for him. Knowing what happened with his own brother, the king said he doesn't want that future for any of his sons. They can't make the same mistakes that family made. After turning 20, princes who aren't heirs must leave the palace. They can only visit the capital for 5 days, and they also can't have private armies. Now we're introduced to the protagonist's uncle, Asnan, the author of a rebellion when the king took the throne, which ended up failing. He is now confined in a tower. Our boy knows his father wants everyone to live well. His butler started asking if that would be possible, but even our protagonist doesn't have an answer until he saw a mysterious rose along the way. But the flower isn't the only bizarre thing that happened there, because it's glowing in the dark. The butler pointed to the protagonist's pocket, which was glowing too. It's that mysterious artifact. Even though all the roses had disappeared, that one was the only one left. Kylan decided to interact with the flower. When he touched its petals, they dried out, and the flower vanished completely. The artifact's strange glow disappeared. Too, Kylan started connecting time and that artifact. He heard from Sisfanian that he's very impatient now, but it's hard for him to shake these thoughts because his desire for answers is huge. 2 days passed, and the butler said our boy had missed breakfast both days. Kylan said he still feels very tired, thinking about a lot of things. Our boy tried to sleep, but he realized he'd gotten an unexpected visitor. The person at the window noticed our boy's magical power is real. A gentle breeze is enough to wake him. Getting out of bed, Kylan said, "It's already too late for visitor." It was Planche who had come. Planche said, A rose is missing from the garden, and that must have been caused by our protagonist. For privacy, Kylan put up a barrier to completely block the sound of their conversation. He said his brother must care a lot about that rose to come all the way there. Plant said it wasn't an ordinary flower. Now Kion is thinking maybe that's why our boy missed breakfast, and he became sure his brother knows something. Randall is also connected to divine power, and that rose is tied to the divine power in his blood. But when Planche asked Randall why the flower doesn't disappear, Planche got no answer at all. Kion started wondering if his brother is actually foolish, expecting a clear answer for no reason. Planche knows only divine power could make that rose last so long, but he doesn't understand why Randall decided to hide it. That surprised the protagonist. When he found out Randall can use divine power, since something had happened, Planche decided to take responsibility, saying he had burned the rose, letting our protagonist play dumb. But before he could leave the room, Kion stopped him, wanting to know what he was doing. Plants believes our boy is skipping breakfast to hide the fact that he's bothered by this. But Kion's real question is why his brother decided to help it. They aren't close enough for that. Those words made Plants realize his brother still remembers, so he said that even if Randall has some kind of power, they won't win. Kion is now deeply shaken by those words. It seems our boy is being helped because Randall doesn't stand a chance against the queen. Finally, our protagonist realized the obvious. His older brother never wanted to become the next king. Their conversation left our boy deeply thoughtful, thinking about that flower and the mysterious artifact he got. Kion wants to understand how it's all connected to reach his real goal. He needs to strip even more power away from the queen. Time is running out. When she learned what happened to Gray, Sis was completely furious because he was badly injured. He didn't even make it into the capital. The news that reached her was that his father was responsible for the attack. Sis can't understand why a father would do that to his own son. It seems it was an internal family dispute. Gray wanted his father's position, and the truth is it was a secret deal between him and the queen. With Gray's help, Sis would help him, too. She believes her plans haven't been discovered. The problem is that her nephew is a sore master. He shouldn't have been injured so easy, so Sis decided to send him some medicine. And she's determined to find out everything that happened in that incident. The queen's fury keeps growing. Whatever happened, it was a strategic move by a master, and Sis still isn't willing to give up. The queen ended up meeting with the knight and gave him a bag full of coin. He thought it was a very generous gesture. This knight is the deputy commander of her family's guard. Nobody can see his true nature, and the queen knows he's a cold assassin. Now, it's a matter of what his next job will be. Sis wants to find out what happened to Gray, and whether it was one of our protagonist's guards. Once the person responsible is found, he needs to be silenced forever. If that happened, the knight will get another bag of money. All he needs is the guard's name. The queen said it was arson, but deep down she's sure it was the protagonist. Rumors about what happened to Gray spread all over the capital, and that day, the king summoned all the nobles to court because he had an important announcement. He said they had ignored magic until now, but it was time to change course by creating a magus. The nobles were shocked because it puts the power of the knight families at risk. Vakan is the name of this division, and in a week, it will be inaugurated. They'll use the old facilities of the queen's family's knights. After that announcement, the king asked to be left alone for a bit, but he ended up running into our protagonist, who knows this will upset the nobles. Kaiwan wants to know if his father will be okay, but the king assured him it's not his son's place to worry about that. Our boy took advantage of being alone to bring up another subject. He wants to speak with the Nai family. The king found it strange, but soon realized his son wants to build allies. Risky but brave. It impressed the king enough that he told his son to do what he wanted. This is also being done, so he won't be the focus of that family. Kion also suggested they go on a hunting trip soon together with his older brother. When he heard the news, the butler was very happy because our protagonist is building his own political faction. Their conversation was interrupted by Arson's arrival, visibly exhausted, but it looks like he found a solution to the teleportation problem. It's the same logic as a magic seal, an impact between the traveler and the portal. Kion wants the detail, but he'll hear them soon, because he told the mage to rest a bit. Arson said he needs to talk to Ellen right away about the discovery, but the protagonist insisted he rest since he was so tired. Arson didn't have the strength to argue. Kylan quietly told Arson not to fall asleep on the way back. But inside the carriage, the mage is already completely out. He remembered the protagonist's word and jolted awake at the exact moment his caravan was being ambushed. Several men were closing in. Arson told the driver to speed up and not look back. A weapon was thrown at the mage, but he managed to defend himself. Somehow, Arson had already been expecting something like that. And as a member of the newly created Vakan, he's fully ready to have a little fun. Kion is in the middle of a banquet with his master, who noticed Arson's absence. Our boy said he must be busy with his own responsibility because what happened to Gray became public, and the queen is going to make a move. She can't be happy now. because she lost a major ally. Only with the patriarch's death can his son inherit the title. The way things are, Sis can't say for sure whether her father interfered in what happened. She'll need time to get her thoughts in order. He also has absolutely no idea what Arson is capable, and our main guy is sure Arson can handle a few nights on his own. The last face our boy saw in his past life was Arson, and for all intents and purposes, that ended up turning into admiration. Right now, the attackers are being eliminated in a brutal way. The assassin is already completely terrified, because that mage is insanely powerful, able to cast spells in no time. Their only chance is to close the distance, so he hypes his men up with the reward they're supposed to get. But their attacks get totally shut down by a magical barrier, which only speeds up the deaths of a few more of them. They quickly realize they never should have taken the contract. Sending a group of 10 nin against an opponent like this is just ridiculous. Arson notices the men are trying to run, so he blocks the path of the only one still alive, the one responsible for the ambush. The corrupt knight drops to his knees and starts begging for mercy, saying he can tell the prince everything he knows. Arson says he'd better be more specific if he wants to keep living, so the knight admits it was orchestrated by the queen. One of her servants works for our boy, and she'll be executed if anything happened. Looking at that bag of money, Arson says his master isn't all that interested in remembering certain things. Completely desperate, the knight says he knows where the money comes from. A secret illegal casino. They make money off rigged bets on fight. But our main guy already knows that place, and he's got someone with well-known expertise about it. Looks like the knight has nothing else to offer. He ends up saying the noble hasn't held a sword in years, and the one he used to use is completely ruined. Arson says that detail might make the young prince curious. The knight also says the conflict between the noble and his son is real, but the mage is sick of it, and decides to eliminate the extra, because that mouth has already said everything that needed to be said. Arson needs to figure out a way back to the palace since the carriage kept going, and he doesn't want to waste his whole week on the trip. Then he starts hearing the sound of horses galloping. Before long, our boy gets his hands on that bag of money, and that sets off a massive chain reaction. Now, the noble is being accused of trying to attack Arson on the road. The imperial family's knights are already outside waiting for him. The noble is getting furious. He thinks he knows why this is happening. It's because of the king and his major. He asks where his knight is, and gets told he was found at the crime scene. On top of that, he was summoned by the queen herself. The noble is determined to go to the palace. The butler asks if he wants to notify the queen about the visit. Still raging, he says if he does that, he'll punish his daughter because she's not who he wants to talk to. He wants to talk to our main guy. At lunch with his family, they're told that a master from Vakan is gone missing. Randall is the one who says it, and he thinks our main guy must be really worried. With a wide smile, Kylan says the king and Ellen should be more worried about it. Blanche stays completely indifferent, and the date for the hunt gets set. Looking at Randall, Blanche asks if he's joining too, but that prince isn't planning to because he thinks the king set it up with the eldest son in mind. Blanche tries to convince him to get some fresh air, but gets ignored. To make it worse, he doesn't seem like the type who even likes hunting. Kylan doesn't know if his older brother is doing all this just to help him. And right then, gathered with his brothers, he feels something strange. It's his own master, and something has Ellen deeply irritated. Not long ago, Ellen went to meet the noble. Ellen asks if he's feeling any grief over losing so many subordinates, especially when he still has to show his face at court. To him, that sounds like a provocation. He says the major's presence there is only tolerated because of the king's favor. Ellen answers that at least someone in that conversation is enjoying royal favor. Furious, he says he already knows who'd been influencing the young prince in a bad way. Closing in on that point, Ellen says the king and the prince are more trustworthy than a noble house that had 10 and beaten by a mage. Ellen leans in and whispers in his ear, asking how much the bribe was this time, saying he must have made a lot more now than when he sold his own son. That genuinely sets him off, and he releases his full aura. Ellen isn't intimidated by it. He releases an even greater power than the noble, and now he's going to show him that some things have been forgotten. It's time to remember where he belongs. The flames of that energy look like they're devouring him. Ellen tells him to think before he acts because he doesn't know who he's talking to. That brief exchange leaves the noble choking for air. Threateningly, he says Ellen may be powerful, but he's alone, and he won't survive long. But the mage assures him he isn't alone in this fight. He asks if the noble knows why Gray got kicked out and sent away. Maybe Gray got an irresistible offer since he's a corrupt noble too. He starts thinking about what his daughter might have done. That would explain a lot of the problems he's dealing with right now. Kyan watches the two of them talking from a palace balcony. From the looks of it, the noble really is going to meet our main guy, and he's furious. What he actually wanted to find out was what Blanche's relationship with the queen is like, but things change too fast. He won't be able to see his grandson now until he figures out which side the boy is really on. As soon as he decides to leave, it starts raining. Kylan realizes the hunt might not happen because of the weather. He asks his brother what he thought of all of it. Planch says he heard about a message that morning, ordering some knights around. Kion figures Planch must have felt a clash between the two monarchs that morning. A sign the king is right. The boy has good swordsmanship. Wanting to know more, Kion asks if his brother talks to the noble often. Planch says he's never met him alone, which is exactly what our main guy expected because that family is full of schemes. Maybe that's why the noble wants to visit him. He definitely wants to strip the queen of her noble title, hoping his grandson can get the crown's title. If his goal is just to push the queen off the board, then he doesn't need to keep helping our main guy. But if he wants to become the next king, he should meet the noble immediately. Looking seriously at our main guy, Planch says he already gave a very clear answer. Now they need to talk about something urgent, the queen's situation. She might make some really stupid decision, but our main guy is already ready for that, and he doesn't want to shield her from the consequences of those actions. If Planch is going to become a real ally, he needs to be ready for what's coming. Planch takes our main guy's hand and agrees because he doesn't want to be used like the queen's puppet anymore. News of their alliance reaches the butler, and he's shocked. That means the eldest son turned his back on the queen, and in theory, he had no reason to. Kion says his brother didn't turn his back on anyone. He just closed his heart to the mother he ended up with. The queen never even realized how toxic she'd been to him, which is why the guy is an alcoholic. And here's the twist. He wasn't even an alcoholic. He just stained himself with wine. His breath was always fresh. It was all to ruin his own image. Every time he looked down on our main guy, it was in front of an audience. He did it hoping the queen would abandon him, but it never worked. And desperate for power, Sis has reached a point of no return. Only death will stop her. Even hearing all that, the butler still doesn't understand why this unexpected alliance happened. Our main guy doesn't have an answer for everything either. The only person who could truly understand Planch already crossed the bridge. The old Kion. Arson isn't in those land. Nobody's been able to find it. A messenger approaches the king to whisper something. They found a prisoner in a certain region. Hearing that, the king is intrigued. Talking with Ellen, he asks if Ellen has forgotten who he really is. Even if he's a laid-back person, he holds the highest title within Vaka. The king wants to show the court the power he has now, so he mobilizes the royal guard to increase the search effort. Right now, that noble family is facing serious accusations because of all this. The same knight who went to talk to the king was the one responsible for bringing that noble in. There are only a few days left until the inauguration of the new mage division. That's going to shock the nobles, with a title being granted to Ellen. Ellen has already realized the king knows exactly how much the nobles despise him. The patriarch in particular. The truth is, Ellen was originally a noble in another land, but he became known as a great mage. He also holds a title from his past, but out of all his title, he prefers being the young prince's master, and from now on, he won't be just that. He'll also be known as a count, a title granted by the king himself. Ellen is immediately surprised, and the king notices it. It's a pretty unexpected situation, and it could lead to major consequence. Our main guy realizes the rain has stopped. The hunt is going to happen. The butler goes to wake our boy up, and is surprised to see he's already up. Kylan took a short walk because he needed to take care of a few things. The butler says our boy needs to look at something else. They just received some horses as a gift. Our boy is impressed by their quality. And that's not all. They also received a cat as a gift, which leaves our boy a little confused. He didn't know if he wanted to adopt a dog or a bird, but getting a cat is definitely a good thing. The animal ends up being handed directly to Hina. A pet like that can stay at the prince's residence, and our boy asks her to be very careful. Hina realizes our main guy remembered her request, and she's really happy about it. It doesn't take long for her to show what happened to her brother. The butler also tells our boy about the king's movement. He sent troops to the specific territory. Arson is still missing, but that doesn't worry our boy at all. He just repeats Alan's words. Its subordinate strength isn't small. Even so, our main guy won't just sit around. A Vakan mage going missing is serious, and it'll be treated that way. Either way, life keeps moving, and it's time for the hunt. Not everyone knows whether Prince Planch will join in, too. There are rumors he isn't in good health. Watching through the window, Planch remembers a conversation. Our main guy told him not to join the hunt, and to say he's feeling feverish. Planch doesn't understand the reason for that plan, especially since he might genuinely not feel well enough to hunt. Kylan says he'll talk to the king about it, so he understands his son's absence. Planch still can't figure out what our main guy wants, but if it keeps him out of the succession conflict, that's fine. While he's thinking about it, he hears a cat meowing, the one that belongs to our main guy, playing with Hina in the garden. Planch knows the girl is our main guy's servant, and the path she's on leads to the rose garden. If he remembers right, around the same time, Randall usually goes to the garden too. One of Planch's guards points a sword at the girl. Rudely, he starts interrogating her right away, asking who she is and how she got there. Hina is terrified and knows she needs to identify herself. But since the guard probably doesn't know sign language, she thinks about writing on the ground. As soon as she starts moving, the guard gets even more aggressive because he doesn't know what she was trying to do. Hina panics because she has no way to write anywhere. That's when someone steps in saying, "The guard's performance is pathetic. He didn't recognize a servant of the prince. His eyesight must be bad. Or maybe it's his intelligent." Plant shows up and saves the day. Embarrassed, the guard apologizes, saying he didn't know she was a servant. Planch briefly meets Tina's eyes and tells her to get the cat out of there. She bows respectfully, thanking him for what he did. Randall says he'd been invited to the hunt by Planch himself, and yet neither of them showed up. Planch didn't expect to run into his brother in the garden, so he starts to excuse himself. Before leaving, Randall comments that things are getting better between Planch and our main guy. Out in the forest, the king isn't sure that's the best thing for his sons. While he tries to teach the mage how to use a bow, Ellen asks for silence so he can focus. Several nobles are with them, and they don't know why they were split into groups. Among them are some a lot of concentration. The mage manages to fire his arrow, but it can't even fly more than a few meters. The king has to hold back his laughter. Ellen hears it anyway, and trying to justify himself says he's a mage who focused his excellence on other areas of life. The nobles realize the rival hunting group isn't going to be very impressive, and at that exact moment, the bird Ellen tried to hunt gets taken down. They can't even see the arrow. Ellen says there's no rule against using magic. He asks the king if that's true, and the king immediately confirms it. Then the king asks if his mage wants to hunt those people too. The nobles realize they're completely defenseless. This was just a warning to that mage and the king. They're no different from that bird. It's time for them to think about what they're going to do with their lives. Kion says he'll soon be hunting a different kind of creature, and that's why he needs those men's help. When they meet again, it'll be at the palace. The queen has just read a letter that leaves her furious. It's Gray's reply. The news is devastating. He can't use aura anymore, and the queen is asked not to bother him right now. On her table is the same bag of money given to that corrupt knight. The bag was found at Arson's last known location. Our main guy is the one who returned it. The queen tries to pretend she doesn't know anything, but our boy knows she met with the corrupt knight. Even so, Sis insists on the lie. Just because a mage disappeared, she says our main guy is panicking. She asks if Kylan has already been negotiating with Gray. Our boy tells her she's completely delusional, and he doesn't need people like her or her family. Sis scolds him, saying he needs to be more polite. Our boy promises that soon she'll pay for what she did. The queen's end is getting close, and Kion guarantees he'll be the one responsible for it. Remembering the conversation only makes Sis even angrier, and she throws the bag of coins onto the floor. Completely consumed by rage, Sis realizes she has nothing left to lose. It's time to settle everything. At night, someone tried to sneak into Planch's room. The boy woke up right away and realized that Mage had slipped past the defenses with ease. It was our protagonist who did it. He promised he wouldn't come in again unless he was invited. Planch wanted to know what his brother was up to, and the boy said he had 3 things to talk about. First, did Randall know they were working together? The answer was yes. Kion didn't expect the news to spread that fast and asked for more details. In the conversation they'd had in the garden, Planch had asked if it bothered his blonde brother, and he'd said it didn't, confirming to our protagonist that things were calm. Even knowing Randall wouldn't make things difficult, Kion still wanted to be more careful. Moving on to the next point, he ended up thanking Planch. The prince said he didn't even care about that. Someone had probably told him what happened in the garden with the girl and the cat. Thinking back on it, he knew exactly why he didn't need any thanks. Hina had already done something like that, and she'd done it very politely. Now that Kion knew that, he could get to the last point. Since the next day would be Vakan's inauguration, he wanted his brother to stay sick for one more day. Planch said Kion was pushing. Kion agreed, but asked his brother not to interfere in any way with what was about to happen. Getting ready for the inauguration, the queen was being attended to. Her maids were wondering if her mood had improved. She'd been extremely stressed lately, and then had everyone worried. Maybe that woman should have listened to her father and married some noble out in the countryside. Without meaning to, one maid pulled the queen's hair too hard. When she tried to apologize, she didn't notice a hand already swinging toward her. The queen slapped her without mercy, making the maid beg for forgiveness. Another servant tried to take the blame, saying she hadn't taught the maid properly. Sis took the chance to push that woman even further. At last, the ceremony began. A lot of nobles had gathered. Ellen announced the founding of that circle of major, dreamed up by the king and backed by the noble court. It marked the start of a new era in the empire. In the middle of the announcement, a huge explosion went off, terrifying everyone. And it happened in the queen's quarters. Our protagonist grew more and more uneasy. People were saying arson was responsible. It looked like the boy hadn't expected anything like that, and he was badly shaken. It didn't take long for the nobles to panic too, and turn their attention to our protagonist. He quickly realized this was also the queen setting him up. The king told everyone to calm down. Chaos was exactly what the attackers wanted, so they needed to keep their composure. They still didn't know what really happened, but someone there said she'd seen the culprit personally. That woman started moving toward the noble. It was the queen, speaking about the identity of the person who blew up her apartment. After the conversations he'd had with our protagonist, Plant started getting really confused. Kylan said everyone heard the explosion, and they were relieved the queen was safe. The queen retorted that the boy was cynical, because he was the one behind the attack. Even while being accused, Kylan said it needed to be investigated. She claimed that before she was attacked, Arson had accused her of setting up an ambush and that our protagonist had told him about it. Earlier that same day, she planned everything with that maid. She'd handed her an artifact to place on the vanity. The poor servant couldn't refuse, so she put the small artifact there, causing a massive explosion that all the nobles could see. Kylan said the boy clearly didn't believe her accusation, so he should bring Arson himself there to confirm his innocence. The queen insisted. She saw him placing the explosive in her room. It was all her trap for the boy, and he was stuck with his hands tied by the accusation. Then she was caught off guard by Arson's arrival. And to make it worse, he wasn't alone. The mage greeted the queen with perfect politeness, the same person she'd just been accusing. Sis also had no idea what her own father was doing in his company. Only then did she realize our protagonist was playing chess on a whole other level. Her end was happening right then. Back to the day Arson disappeared. He met with Kiri. What he actually got was a few days off, but his disappearance put the noble family in serious trouble. He had no way to dodge those accusations. Arson went to negotiate with the noble, following the prince's instruction. He said the queen was going to use that to build a conspiracy, so the noble needed to hide on those lands. In exchange, he had to support the boys so the false accusations wouldn't go forward. Kylan now had a full strategic advantage. With the king present, he said the investigation should start immediately. The queen had demanded the mage appear, and that had just happened. As he passed by her, Kion said he'd warned her she shouldn't be so reckless. Now her own father, the king, and the knights were all against. Sis started smiling like someone completely twisted. She said our protagonist's mother had been just as insolent, proof they really were alike. She showed she was armed with a knife, and now she tried to attack our protagonist. Blood started spilling across the floor. Nobody expected it. The queen couldn't believe the blood she'd shed. Not even our protagonist saw it coming. Planche had been told not to interfere at all, but he decided to play the hero anyway. Now the poor guy was about to die. Sis got even more furious, realizing she'd been betrayed by her own son, and she drove the knife in deeper. Kion watched his brother suffer in a brutal way. The king tried to stop it. His knights were mobilized to restrain the queen. Deeply worried, the king told her to stop. The hand holding the knife was cut off. Leaving the queen in pain and shock. Furious, Kylan asked if that insolent woman hadn't heard the king. She'd been ordered to let the boy go. The guards took control. The queen was arrested, and the nobles realized the boy had used an aura's sword. That meant he was a sword master. In the middle of the chaos, Kylan tried to help his brother. Planche said he was impressed his brother could use a sword. Right after that, he passed out. Everyone called for a healer. The king was visibly worried about his son, and the same was true for our protagonist. But since they didn't know what might happen next, the king had to be evacuated immediately, something he didn't want to do, because he didn't know what would happen to his son. Ellen told him he'd lost a child too, but he wasn't a king. Things far more important were at risk now, and the prince would handle everything. While the boy performed first aid, he still waited for the healer to arrive. The situation kept getting worse. Kion was also angry at his brother. He shouldn't have done that. This wasn't the time to die. Not under these circumstances, and not even the blessing in his blood was helping now. It was only a matter of time before he died. The healer was already on the way. Hida was heading there too. Kion remembered Prince Randall might also be useful in that situation. In moments of chaos, the human heart shows its real intention. Someone as calculating as him had just shown what he was capable. Kion was furious at that refusal to act, and he desperately wanted his brother to survive. It would be tragic for his life to be lost there. Later that day, our protagonist went to visit someone in prison. It was the queen, who wouldn't be clapping anymore. She said she had a question too. She suggested they'd both be honest for the first time. There was something the boy was still hiding from her, and Sis was absolutely sure of it. Kion told her, everyone has secrets, ones nobody will ever find out. Now, he had a question for her too, about Queen Aisha's death, and whether Sis had been involved, showing an even more twisted side. Sis said she'd never forget it. It was the first life she'd ever taken using poison. Furious at the confession, Kylan said there was nothing left to talk about. Before he left, Sis warned him they'd promised to be sincere. After thinking about it, Kylan said he'd honestly expected the queen to ask about her own son's safety, ignoring what could have happened. Sis said he'd only been an obstacle right to the end. She tried to do her best for him, but the boy had proven to be a fool. He'd never been useful for anything, and her imprisonment was proof of that. Our protagonist said people run toward what they want to protect. The way that attack happened showed the queen had never been trained in combat. The boy didn't even need to block it. He could have just stepped aside. He was protected by magic too. Plant should have known all of that, but he still made that. Sis wondered if the boy did it to protect her, because he had no reason to. Kion said if she hadn't sunk so low, she would have understood her son's reason, how he tried to warn her about the risk of those decisions, about her behavior, and about her inability to change. At the peak of her madness, Sis said she didn't regret anything, laughing like something out of a nightmare. The nobles who'd still been loyal to her family switched sides, and the queen's crimes were exposed. Sis was executed not long after. Her death also wasn't mourned, according to that place's tradition. After a week of dismantling her palace, the work still wasn't finished. People avoided her name. Nobody wanted to be associated with the queen. On top of that, nobody expected the boy to be a sword master who could use magic. Since the incident, he hadn't left Blanche's bedside. Blanche finally woke up and asked why the boy was there with his mouth full of banana. Kion said he was trying to figure out how to explain his sword skills without raising suspicion. Since he hadn't reached a conclusion, he told his brother to rest more. Blanche told him to do that in his own room, but our protagonist asked him to be a little nicer. Kion didn't want to leave yet to avoid all the questions. More time passed, and even Ellen missed the boy. Kion ended up getting kicked out of Blanche's room. Blanche was sick of it. Considering he'd stayed there 4 days, he admitted that was more than generous. Ellen had already been imagining the boy would stay another week, and that was the plan. Even the maids were talking about the rumors that our protagonist used an aura's sword to his master. The boy didn't leave just because he got kicked out. He must have come up with some interesting conclusion, something that could work for everyone. Kion knew he was a terrible liar, but someone could help it. He went to the king's office, and the king also couldn't know the whole truth. Kylan told him that during the protagonist's ceremony, he'd received a blessing from Sustanian that awakened his sword master ability. Kylan would do a small demonstration since he could use aura and magic. He'd learned a few tricks shaping that sword. Now the king understood why he'd been in danger in that situation more than his own son. He also realized the mage had always known. Kylan apologized and said he should have told him sooner, but the king understood the boy's reason. The problem was the nobles wanted answers, and Vauclan's ceremony had been postponed. It was suggested the boy use that to explain himself. Still, the king really wished he'd been told earlier. Ellen quickly realized his disciple was genuinely clever for the king. All of this was beneficial. Now that everyone knew his son was a sword master, his rivals would be very cautious from now on. Not just them, but Randall too, who had stayed calm, even on that day of crisis. The king worried about the possibility of Randall taking the throne. His thoughts were interrupted by a question, and even with the worry, he realized only time would tell what would happen. After a week, the ceremony happened again. They also announced the presence of the newest sword master. Meanwhile, her family isolated themselves completely, avoiding any contact. There, the patriarch didn't stop practicing with the sword, worrying even his servants. What made him furious was knowing he hadn't been able to see the boy's aura, something that only happens when the opponent is stronger. Finally, winter came to those lands. Our protagonist's cat was wandering through the garden and ran into Blanche, even while ignoring the animal. The cat brushed affectionately against his legs. The flowers the queen used to grow no longer scented the air there. The king's birthday was being celebrated, and he was genuinely happy to be surrounded by good company. Spring came to them too, a new beginning for all of them. And in the middle of that celebration, a mysterious man approached. Ellen and his disciple were very surprised because Chase, the brother from our protagonist's past life, was there too. We were taken back to 2 months before that event. A lot had changed in the protagonist's life. He felt renewed in a way that was hard to explain. Ellen was personally invited to attend that birthday. The king wanted his friend there since it was his first birthday as a single man. Knowing the party would be wild, Ellen promised he wouldn't leave the region. He also said time was passing way too fast. Now that they were having some tea, the king remembered when the mage arrived in those lands and was eager to see what the new year would bring him. Our protagonist kept training his abilities, defending himself intensely against Arson's attacks. His aura sword was a terrifying weapon. By manipulating energy, he could turn it into a powerful shield. After defending, he decided to go on the offensive, cornering the mage with ease. It was an impressive training session done in front of all the other mages in the organization. Kion was impressed by Arson's teleport ability, and Arson was also impressed by the boy's swordsmanship. His control over mana was truly refined. He was even more surprised to find out the boy had been holding back. The mages who saw it now wanted to learn from Arson, who didn't need to chant spells. Blanche watched the training too, and when asked if he liked the show he said no. Then the protagonist asked what he wanted now, and whether he was interested in training those major. In his past life, Planch had been responsible for strengthening that division, a key piece in turning them into the forces they could become. That was why the protagonist made the suggestion. Planch still acted uninterested. Their conversation was interrupted by the butler, who informed them that the patriarch wanted an audience. It definitely has to do with our boy's aura, and he's already on his way to that meeting. Kion told his brother that everyone knows they're allies now. He can't stay hidden in the shadows forever because soon he could be attacked. After training all winter, the patriarch wants to see our boy. Not knowing he hides his aura with magic, that alone is enough to make him feel weaker. Even so, our boy is stuck because he knows he isn't strong enough yet. Another problem is Planch, who still doesn't have a faction of his own among the noble. Another political war is about to break out on this board, and our protagonist needs to keep his eyes on one person, Randall, someone he ended up running into in that same corridor. Coldly, Randall said he almost wished he'd helped our boy that day. Looking down on a prince is a huge taboo in this place's custom. Kion, knowing that, planted himself firmly, and said he was 3 steps away from putting an end to all that arrogance. He brought up that rose that seemed eternal. Looks like he finally understood what it meant. Randall asked if our boy had seen it. Smiling, Kion said he was always thinking about why the rose stood out like that. Maybe it was a sign that flowers will always bloom in his brother's garden as long as they never end up out of reach. And that was exactly the message he wanted to send. They stared each other down at the end of the conversation. When Ellen heard about it, he was furious and suggested introducing Randall to the patriarch so they could plot together against the protagonist. Since our boy seemed so willing to make enemies, Ellen is furious at his disciple's attitude. But Kyle made it very clear he didn't provoke anyone for no reason. Now he's sure his brother won't make any move until he's certain there's no chance of an alliance forming between Kion and the Patriarch. After everything that happened, the Patriarch is going to be very cautious because he can't wait to get to our boy. Plant also became an ally, but her family needs to feel out new alliance, and that doesn't mean our protagonist is on the list. At the place where the illegal fights happen, people are having fun. A hooded man ended up drawing attention, and they demanded he pay the entry fee. The answer came as a sword strike that separated a head from its body. The orders Kiri received were clear. Panic started spreading through the place. The only people he must not touch are the ones who work there against their will. The guards freaked out, but they were eliminated easily. There weren't supposed to be any survivor. Kiri is carrying out his order with total dedication. He went to the main office, and he almost got hit in the face when he did. One of the thugs took a girl hostage. Kiri is much more skilled now. He knows the girl agreed to be used as a hostage, so her life doesn't need to be spared. The gangster now has a hole in his chest. He said the person in charge of the place won't let this go. Kiri replied that he doesn't care at all. When the guards arrived, several lives had already been taken. Kiri abandoned his sword, revealing himself as a servant of the third prince. The news is spreading fast, and a messenger needs to report what happened. The underground fight casino was attacked. The noble family needs to know. That same messenger's path ended up being blocked by a few people. Kion asks where the man was going in such a hurry. Completely furious, the patriarch scolded his subordinate because all he had to do was report what happened immediately. Now, even the royal family is involved in the investigation. All of this because Kiri survived the attack. Kylan passed a message to that messenger, and while he was being chewed out, the messenger said Kylan failed to pull Planch to his side. When the attack happened, they were told to pin the blame on their prince. The patriarch is thinking about that now. He thought the brothers had joined forces, but he might be wrong. A little calmer, he started to believe there's still hope, deciding he'll meet Planch the next day. After the meeting happened, Planch passed that information to our protagonist. Looks like he bit the bait they'd set. He really did try to convince Planch to become an ally. The investigation is unlikely to find the noble responsible for it. The attack only served to knock down his influence. Kaya now wants to know whether his brother has thought about the proposal he received. Planch said he's ready to put it into action. Our protagonist asked to be reminded what they'd planned. It's about Vakon. He'll be put in charge of that division because of the illegal fight casino. Another noble ended up being punished. Kiri received a 2-month suspension for using his sword without permission, and that time had finally passed. Our protagonist was woken up by his butler, who wanted to know if he'd like to rest a little longer. Kylan said he had a weird dream. He still has the feeling of it, but he can't remember anything. The butler said it could be a sign of good luck and reported that Kiri made a move last night. He said he'd seen a Tansel caravan. That's a diplomatic visit. Plants found it really strange because it came with several priests. He thought about bringing it up with our protagonist immediately. Among those people is also the heir of Sakura. Now the question is what he's doing there. Chase said it's an honor to speak with one of the heirs. Flashes of our protagonist's past are reflected in the meeting between those two. Chase admits he's far from his land, but he has business to take care of there. Mounted on his horse, our protagonist saw who was there. That seemed to explain the feeling he had that morning. This is exactly what was going to happen that day. Ellen was surprised when he found out who was present for the king's birthday. Chase, the heir of Sakura, something that makes him a little uneasy. Before long, Ellen decided what needed to be done. See our protagonist. He believes his disciple needs to prepare better for this meeting. He might hesitate too much, feeling conflicts tied to his past life. Chase is already waiting for him inside the hall. Approaching our boy, he revealed he'd been waiting to meet him for a long time. Kylan stayed silent for a few seconds, and Chase found that really strange. Keeping his composure, our boy said he'd been waiting for this meeting too. Ellen finally managed to enter the hall as well. Seeing that both princes had met, he asked why they were practically blocking the entrance. Chase said he hasn't seen the mage in a long time and hopes he's doing well. While the two kept talking, our protagonist fell back into that quiet inward silence. He needs to let out a deep breath. Because of this meeting, Plant watches everything closely. For the Aries Sakura to come to those lands, there has to be an important reason. Ellen asked what that reason was. Chase realized he couldn't hide anything from him. His words might not deserve to be taken as truth, but he hopes the master will hear him out. Chase went back to the topic of the axis of time, which had disappeared without explanation. Ellen would never forget that artifact because he was one of the people responsible for inspecting it. Now the question is why Chase is talking about it, since he was there when the artifact vanished. Since then, strange memories have been coming into his head, things he doesn't remember. At first, he thought it might just be a dream, but soon, he started to think he was going crazy until he reached the point where he couldn't deny it anymore. He simply had to accept it. Those memories were real, and he's sure his brother is somewhere inside the kingdom. Ellen didn't doubt him. If anything, he was surprised, so he asked whether Chase used that artifact to bring his own brother back. He knows the war was caused by people who wanted to possess the artifact. Baron was one of the ones who sacrificed himself to protect his ideal, and he would never ignore that sacrifice just to have his brother again. He kept the artifact until the end, and never used it for anything. That lines up with what Sasfanian has said so far. Even so, Chase still remembers his brother's look that day, and realized he can't let him find out he knows everything. Just knowing he's okay is already a huge relief. Ellen is now deeply intrigued by these two brothers, and the path fate has set for them. Kiri ended up presenting himself to both of them. He came to deliver a message from the prince, who would like to speak with them after dinner. Ellen realized he should have used a silent spell. Being careless, he asked whether Kiri had heard anything. When there was no answer, he realized he shouldn't regret it. He told Chase that Kiri is the protagonist's personal guard. Chase was impressed by that, because knights usually come from noble families. Introducing himself more properly, Kiri said his last name is Byrne, which made Chase even more anxious. That's a name passed down in the royal family for generations. It means the hero who will never disappear. Back to our protagonist, he's still trying to figure out what motivated that visit. He's worried about the future and the war that could happen. Maybe his efforts were pointless. He still doesn't know why a war started in his other life. Still trapped in those thoughts, he was interrupted by his brother. Plant wants to know why a distant prince would want to talk to our protagonist. To make it worse, Kion looks visibly worn down. So, Planche asked what his brother would do if something he wanted badly had been claimed by someone else. Planche said he doesn't have a habit of taking what doesn't belong to. Kion asked what he'd do if it were something he truly needed. Would he still limit himself to that moral rule? Even after thinking for a bit, Planche didn't change his answer. Our boy has to admit, he really was shaken by that meeting. In the current timeline, Planche has no idea what's going to happen. Planche demands answers from our protagonist right now. Using magic to block the sound, Kion remembered that his brother asked who he really was, a question that made our protagonist very nervous. Kion said time in this world went back 10 years, leaving his brother stunned, and he used to be Chase's brother. That's the truth that got revealed. It was time for Ellen to talk with his disciple. His secret has been revealed to one more person, and that has the mage seriously worried. Kion said he didn't give many explanations either, only that he was Chase's brother, and now he's Planche's brother. Ellen is still very uneasy about this situation, and wants to know what things look like. Now, our boy has a request to make, and he's counting on his master's cooperation. There's something he can't stop thinking about. Randall, his other brother, and all those priests who visited the kingdom recently. That isn't a simple coincidence. Outside, Planche ended up running into Chase. He asked what he was doing in the palace garden. Chase said he had free time, and the king gave him permission to look around the garden. But it seems Planche doesn't like that. Even so, Planche said he'd been misunderstood. He's actually curious and wants to know the reason for the visit. It doesn't look like Chase is there just to talk to the great mage. Chase had heard he'd be facing the person responsible for vodka. Changing the subject like that left Planche surprised. He didn't think the information had spread so fast. Very seriously, Chase asked whether that division is going to be the foundation of the prince's power. Watching that reaction, Vakan finally understood everything. Chase must have done something in that future version through those mages. Realizing that Chase knows a lot more than he lets on, Vakan still made one thing clear to him. He serves the protagonist. Still worried, Chase said that for the prince's own good, he'd better be right about that. Back to our boy, who's reading a letter. The butler he's investigating doesn't seem to have any record at all. While he's thinking about it, he's told the banquet will be announced soon. Since he needs to reach conclusions fast, Kyung asked his own butler for help. A certain land set 30 priests there. He's sure his brother Randall is involved. The butler said they're there for the king's birthday celebration, but the number of priests is way too high, so there has to be another reason. That makes the butler really rack his brain, and our boy realizes he still hasn't understood anything. Still, the boy said, they shouldn't even be able to send that many priests. That nation had a rough time recently, and they needed help from the kingdom. And now they're paying the favor back by sending valuable priests. Kion realized that whenever there are floods, there are epidemics too. That nation must need healers immediately. Even so, sending priests to the king's birthday. Now it all seems pretty obvious. Those people can't be real priests. After that conversation, Planche got pretty lost in thought. In the castle corridors, he ended up running into Hina. He asked if the cat had gotten stuck again, telling her to step back a little. He said he'd help. He ended up closing the door even more, and told her he'd take care of the cat that day. That's Planche's room, and besides the cat, our protagonist is inside too. Kion went there to ask his brother if he was going to the banquet that night. Planche asked what his dear brother had planned for the day. Tylan said, there are 30 fake priests in that place. The princes entered the hall together. To the nobles, it's strange to see them united. Maybe it's the way they found to show their ally. It was clear they were challenging Randall through that show of unity. For our protagonist, that's more than enough. If his brother is still planning something, he won't be able to pull it off. Planche asked if that's what our boy wanted. Kylan said, it's only the first step. He also noticed our protagonist seems to be looking for someone among the guests. It looks like someone is missing. Kiri is already investigating outside, and our protagonist is sure that isn't a coincidence. That guard's job is to follow Randall as soon as he leaves the banquet. The prince moves around protected by his guard, so Kiri has to be very sneaky and discreet. Luckily for him, a noble couple was hiding in the bushes fooling around. They apologized for what happened and Randall kept going with his schedule like normal. Another person who needs to be investigated is the prince's right-hand man. Kiri only needs to figure out one thing on this mission. His presence was finally noticed. Those men sensed his killing intent. They aren't priests, just like our boy suspected, they're knives, and he meant to confront his brother about it.